We're just waiting for His Excellency, the Minister of Indonesia, to come, and then we'll get started. Thank you very much. Hi, Mr. John Defterios. Nice to see you. I'm glad you made it.
Your Excellency.
Excellency, how are you? Nice meeting you. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm a bit late. Waiting for the buggy. Nice meeting you, sir. Nice meeting you.
Good to see you again.
Kembang telepon.
So good afternoon, everyone, both in the room, and thank you for making it after the special session we had with the Secretary of State of the United States, Anthony Blinken. I'm John Defterios, the former emerging markets editor for CNN. Contribute to the forum as a senior fellow in energy and materials with this group that put this session on. This is going to be a 45-minute discussion, and one of the most important on the agenda here at the special meeting, the business case for the energy transition. It's well noted that there's a lot of capital flowing into energy, $2.8 trillion in 2023. Potentially, we crossed $2 trillion that went into renewables. But if you look at 90% of it is going to the G20 countries, and the countries that need it the most in the global south are not getting their fair share. It's even more pronounced if you strip out China, India, and Brazil of the emerging market sphere, which is getting most of that capital. So we want to look at how to de-risk money going into the global south. We have a fantastic panel of mix here, from technology to a minister from Indonesia, a minister from Tanzania, the largest exporter of energy in the world in Aramco, and a very large fund manager that's deploying capital around the world. Just want to introduce you one by one. To my immediate left is JP Tricois. He's the chairman and CEO of Schneider Electric of France. Can you give a warm welcome to him?
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Arifin Tasrif, you're really delighted you made it to the session as we started. Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources from Indonesia. Great to see you. Amin Nasser is the President and CEO of Saudi Aramco, one of the key hosts here at the special meeting in Riyadh. Dr. Shati Kijali is the Minister of Industry and Trade for Tanzania. Great to see you. And Jose Minaya is the Chief Executive Officer of Nuveen, based in New York of the United States. Great to have you. I'm going to make it fairly straightforward here. We're going to do 2 rounds of questions. I had invited our panel to follow up on other comments in the table after we get through those first 2 rounds. Time permitting, and we have about 43 minutes, I'd love to take a few questions from the floor as well. I think it's great because we have a really realistic mix here on the table to get to the bottom of the business case of the transition. We've seen some major projects in Europe on offshore wind, for example, or in solar, because of the cost of inflation and high interest rates, topple some very sizable projects where those who deployed really lost their shirts. So what did we learn in the COVID-19 pandemic, and what happened to supply chains, conflict with Russia, Ukraine, and here in the Middle East, putting pressure on prices? And how do we keep energy security balanced with sustainability, and very importantly for countries like Tanzania and Indonesia, access to energy as well? So that's the spirit of the conversation. And one of the things, JP, that comes into the play here is, how do you be most efficient where a technology company can work as easily in Africa or in Southeast Asia and say, I know you need to deploy, I know access to energy priority. How do we do it most efficiently to support the business case for the transition? Do you want to start there? And some of the actually concrete examples of where you're deploying in the emerging world where it's working.
Yeah, so the question of energy is extremely complex, and we need pretty much everything, right? We need fossil, we need renewable. The place where we work the most is efficiency. We call it the greenest, the cheapest, the fastest to implement, which is how do you apply technology to be more efficient in every industry? And we do that, I think, with all the people around this table. There's been a work done at the WEF over the past year, done by the IBC, and it shows that there is a potential, if we are decided to do it, of saving yearly cost in energy of 2 trillion a year, on getting into a better level of efficiency by 30%, which would free a lot of capacity, a lot of carbon, but a lot of capacity in the energy system to feed the development or to bring energy to emerging countries, with a payback estimated to 5 years. So what we are addressing at Schneider is that very specific case of a sector of energy where you don't speak about large projects. You are speaking about thousands of projects that can be more efficient by leveraging the disruption, the major disruption today, which is digitization, smart buildings, smart infrastructure, smart cities, smart manufacturing. Now, when we speak about the specific case of fast developing countries and emerging countries, the question of the transition is not to be more efficient, it is access to energy. And take the case of Schneider, 50% of our turnover today is in emerging countries. It's been probably 70% of our growth over the past 15 years. And we are combining that double approach of accelerating energy efficiency on one side, on bringing technological solution of high level to bring fast access to emerging countries in different configurations. But I was with you, Minister Arifin, 1 week ago in Indonesia. The case is very different from Minister Kijaji here in Tanzania. On each case, we address it in a different manner.
Good. One of the challenges for Indonesia, and I followed your country and the growth, and it's one of the fastest growing economies and very populated, so it offers the growth opportunity for investors. And we know the work of the government to try to get energy access there. So I think it would be good for this audience that's exploring the business case of the transition, Your Excellency, is what is your energy mix today? And is it viable to say that renewables will play a key part of it? And then where do hydrocarbons come in and geothermal to kind of solve some solutions? And do you see, and I just had a session with the head of the Asian Development Bank most recently at the World Energy Council in Rotterdam, where they talked about collaboration with ASEAN to have cross-border energy sharing, which is something you would not have said 5 years ago. So let's talk about your energy mix and where you want to get the support for renewables and where hydrocarbons come into play.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, Indonesia, we have 270 million people. We have 16,000, 6,000 are inhabitants. We have to secure energy for the people. Thanks God that we are blessed with the hydrocarbon. We have oil, we have gas, we have also coal. Our coal deposit is huge, so we can live with more than 100 years. But since we joined the Paris Agreement, we have to do the transition of energy. And also we were blessed with many kind of renewable energy. Yeah, we have a source of geothermal, hydro, and then also we have solar, which is popular now. And then
you definitely have optionality, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our issue is how to build the infrastructure. So we have to build the infrastructures in order to allow access of this renewable into our systems. So we need the collaboration. Yeah. By doing this, we believe that we can reach net zero by 2060. But beside of that, we also have a target of reduction of the NDC, even we increase. So this kind of things in-house, and then the external cooperation will be very benefit for us.
Okay, can I follow very quickly? Are you getting access to capital to pursue renewables? Is the business case there to do so, or do you say too expensive, I'm going to go with my coal base and my natural gas?
Yeah, coal base is the most competitive one. Yeah, for us.
And also the most polluting, which is your challenge.
Yes, but unfortunately we have to use it. We have to rely on it in the past. But we are going to change. But also our geothermal source, we are only using 10% of our resources now, 2.3 gigawatt only, yeah, instead of 23 gigawatt. Our energy mix is less than 50% right now. We try, yeah, to increase, to reach 25% by 2030.
35%
Yes.
by 2030.
So in order to motivate the investor to work with us, we provide such kind of incentive. Yeah, so we cover the government, cover the drilling risk to be shared with the investor. And then also currently we do the early retirement of our coal-fired power plant,
Wow.
working together with ADB. We also engage with the G7, with the JETP program, Just Energy Transition Partnership. But we need to speed up.
That process.
Yes.
That's what everybody does say.
Especially we lost time during this global geopolitical issues.
Yes, that does get complicated. But you remember the G20, and then I know Brazil has this as a priority. I met with the minister today about what they want to put on the agenda for COP30, and the troika between the UAE, Azerbaijan, and carrying that to Brazil to be a bit more realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, Nasser, it's great to see you again. We were just recently in Rotterdam, and you make a very strong case about where the growth of energy demand is coming from. And I wanted to see if we can have a realistic conversation about the energy transition and the role, for example, if I'm looking in Africa, of natural gas, where there's abundance of it. Same thing in Indonesia. What sort of realism would you like to put into this debate today about the business case for the transition and the role for hydrocarbons in that energy mix going forward? But I know Aramco's focused on the global south for good reason, right? Because the access to energy is not there where it should be, particularly in Africa.
Yeah, thank you, John. Definitely, energy transition is a critical priority for everybody, and everybody is working toward achieving that. However, what we need is a realistic energy transition program that is just and inclusive and include everybody. You know, when you look at the total population, 85% is in the global south. And if you think about renewables, we're talking earlier about renewable, 5% of the investment is going for some of the countries, the most needed countries in the global south, and 95% is going somewhere else.
80% is even within the G20, so it's very hard to we'll get into that with Jose. It's really difficult.
But let's look at where we are today, some facts, you know. Today, the income per capita is around $1,000 in the global south compared to more than $50,000 in the global north, while we want to equalize the level playing fields for everybody. It doesn't work like this. You are going to go at a multi-speed, depending on the economic maturity of every country and based on the demand of every country. Today, when we look at how much we invested and facilitated by a lot of incentives from the global north, $9.5 trillion. But we generated, if you look at it in the total mix, we need to look at numbers. 4% of the total energy comes from solar and wind. This is, if you look at it from 2000 to 2023, 23 years. But during the same period, from 2000 to 2023, the fossil fuel grew by 100 million barrel of oil equivalent. So it doesn't mean that we are investing in solar, wind, or renewables, that the other mix will not increase. We need all sources of energy. Coal, because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, gas became at a high demand. Coal consumption started to increase. We need to understand very clearly that policy without technological readiness and without economic competitiveness is not going to drive a solution. Incentives will drive a solution, but it's not sustainable. And this is what's happening in the global north. They're putting a lot of funds to create the transition, relying a lot on the transition. It doesn't work where the demand is. Today, 50 to 60% of the demand is in the global south. By 2050, 80% of the hydrocarbon demand is going to be in the global south. So we need to take that into the consideration if we are worried about emissions. And we need to focus on emission rather than picking winners and losers. We should not invest in hydrocarbon. We should only invest in renewable. We need to invest in all energy sources and adjust. As we build more of the new, then we adjust, but not to come and stop. Because if we stop investing, what we will end up with, prices will go up, And you will end up with more coal utilization, because at the end of the day, coal is the cheapest. His Excellency, if I put it in numbers, coal in an average is $50 per barrel of oil equivalent. LNG is 70. Oil is fluctuating between 80 and 90. So countries where they have different priorities, they will be going to the most affordable, because you cannot solve for one. You look at the trilemma: sustainability, access or affordability, and energy security. You need to solve for all of these things together. So we need to focus on emissions. We have demonstrated that over the last 15 years, through energy efficiency, the saving is 90 million barrels of oil equivalent. The saving from investment in solar and wind over the last 15 years only eliminated 15 million of barrel oil equivalent. Don't also forget that the world today consumes around 250 million barrel of oil equivalent between gas, oil, and coal. And it is increasing. Let's look at the number this year. It's 100, we'll be looking at around 104. We were 100 million oil.
Yes.
Gas is increasing. Coal is at the highest level at an 8.5
barrels equivalent, correct?
Coal around 80 million barrel of oil equivalent. Gas is around 70. Oil is 100, 104. So if you add them up, it's around 255 to 160 million barrel of oil equivalent. So we need to have solutions that will take into consideration affordability, energy security, and sustainability. Otherwise, we'll end up with more emission. The increase in coal, because of the increase in prices that shifted a lot of attention to coal, and coal production start to increase. In 1 year, we wiped out everything that we have saved in terms of emission by investment in renewable. So we need to take that into consideration when we look at the world and what needs. We need a pragmatic, a realistic time frame. We all working for the same goal, which is reducing emission, achieving net zero. And we have been always saying that in order to achieve net zero by 2050, 1/3 of the emission will come from efficiency improvement. That is key. 1/3.
That's doable, you think?
Yeah,
Okay.
It can be done. We have the world demonstrated in 15 years the reduction because of efficiency is 90 million. It's more than solar and wind. So I think we need all energy sources for the time being. What we need to focus on is reducing the emission. The issue is emission, not picking winner and loser, and we should not invest in. You need to invest in all. And if you look at Aramco, or we are investing in solar, wind, geothermal, e-fuel, hydrogen. But at the end of the day, you look at affordability. For example, you want to accelerate transition, we'll be more than happy to help. But look at our hydrogen program here. We are still waiting for offtake.
Yeah.
Why? It is expensive.
It's expensive. Okay, why don't we park it there, and I'm going to circle back with you in terms of where that demand is going to be distributed in the future, because you said most of it's in the global south, and how do you position Aramco for that? I think Tanzania is a really good case study for us, because we had discussions here within the Center of Energy and Materials at the forum, which put this subject on the agenda, but also access to capital. Are you getting, Minister, access to capital to pursue renewables, and does it meet your energy needs? Can you now go pursue gas that you have at your ready, and can you raise money for that? So I'm really curious to see what's the reality in Tanzania.
Yeah, thank you, John. As you have said, in Tanzania, we're just now implementing the second 5-year development plan that puts focus on industrializing the country, but also taking advantage of the population that we have, 61.7 million people within Tanzania. But when you talk of East Africa, 500 million, going to Africa, 1.3 million, then those are the 1.3 billion people. So you can see the demand is there.
So East Africa has bigger population than the European Union.
Yes, yes. So taking that into consideration, the energy transition becomes the significant thing that we really need to invest on. You have talked about the issue of capital, investing the private capital coming to Tanzania to invest on, having the resources that we have, as you have said, from natural gas, coming to the hydropower plant. We are just doing, but the problem is capital. Yes, inviting capital, particularly from private investors just coming to invest with us. We are doing a lot in making our investment in environment being good enough so that these private investors can come and they invest with us, but it still is a challenge. You have talked about the consortium dealing with natural gas in the southern part of Tanzania. Yes, we started it at least almost 8 years now, but we are yet to make it happen. And we just put a deadline for us, at least by 2025, at least we should see that natural gas in the southern part of Tanzania starting its implementation. So capital is a challenge.
Good. How about raising capital for that natural gas project? So you have Equinor, Shell, and Exxon looking at that field. So is it easier for you to raise money for hydrocarbons than it is to deploy renewable energy?
It's not that much easy, but we, as I said, we are trying hard to make them understand so that we move. I thank you for just coming to invest with us with that pipeline from Uganda to Tanzania. We can see now, yes, the demand is there and we are seeing they are coming, and we believe even those companies that we have mentioned, the Shell and others will come and invest with us. And we are telling them, yes, the energy mix is paramount so that we can balance. We can see a lot of factories are developing in Tanzania, are emerging in Tanzania. So there is a need for having investors to come and invest with us.
Okay, so we have one of the largest investors here, Mr. Manayas from Nuveen, a U.S. Institutional investor. Do you want to share with this audience, Jose, the percentage of money you're putting into private equity that looks at opportunities in Africa or the largest economy in Southeast Asia? And you made a very good point when we met in the green room. There's capital around. Yeah. What needs to happen in terms of structure, financial structures, to get it to deploy to a Tanzania or Indonesia, do you think?
Yeah, so to put it in context, we manage about 1.3 trillion. When I think about the private equity or private debt side of that, around the energy transition story, it's around 29 billion that we manage, and that's kind of been a very fast-growing area. I will tell you, when you think about energy transition, whether it's global north or south, it is one of the hottest topics within the investor community. We do an annual survey of all of our institutional clients, and over 87, it was something like 80+% of them wanted to reallocate more capital to alternatives, which is where this fits in. And when you dig in, it was around infrastructure and it was around the energy transition. So the demand for capital to go out there, we all know all the 2050 targets, 2060 carbon zero. So there is tremendous demand to get there. And to go back, His Excellency made this comment earlier, but I will tell you, even for us, the overwhelming lion's share of that almost 30 billion is invested in places like the UK, Germany, the US, and Italy. And why? Because we can deploy capital there quickly. And it's available to us. And by the way, at a higher return than our core energy investments, where it might be 4%, for the same level of risk, same off-takers, same ratings, I may get 8, 9, 10, 11%, largely because there's less operators, there's less access. So we like that efficiency to get that excess return. But what we all know is the broader need around the energy transition, what's happening with climate change, the broader need of where the demands are going to come from is from the global south. So I'm not alone in this. A lot of us are interested in saying, how do we tap into that? We've had conversations with Africa and other emerging markets where for us the issue is not understanding the risks. A lot of times I'll get people coming over, hey, we can help you understand the risks. No, that's what we do for a living. We know what the risks are. We're comfortable with them. It's how do we get the capital that we allocate on behalf of our investors comfortable in this ecosystem? And that's not just putting equity. That is, do you have junior equity, preferred? Do you have mezzanine debt? Do you have senior debt? Do you have banks participating? And by the way, is there a rating structure that can come in behind this? Because if you had all of that, you would unlock a tremendous amount of capital. Now, by the way, this is how it works for all of our asset classes over time. Whether you go back to real estate, core infrastructure, those are long J curves for regulatory bodies to show up, for more operators. I think the question around hydrocarbons or renewables in Africa, well, there's more operators coming into it. You could do that a lot quicker versus on the renewable side. That takes time. But what you keep hearing is this urgency from the world that this thing is there. To break through that J curve, we all know how the J curve works. The capital will find its way. By the way, it always does. It takes time. But if you want to break through that J curve, that is where we need more engagement on the public-private discussions. That is where we talk to the African Development Bank. We talk to the UN, the World Bank. We say, hey, is there a way to create something here? Because look, if you gave us this ecosystem, if you de-risk this part of the capital stack, we assure you capital is going to come, because the other issue you have here, you want long-dated capital. This doesn't work very well for a hedge fund that's going to want a very quick return. These are expensive, long-driven investments, and that long-term driven capital needs that broader, regulated, transparent ecosystem, and one that is shared, that we're not the only ones in there, and multiple people are playing to get access there. But the interest, the understanding of the risk, that's not the issue.
Okay. At COP28, there was the UAE consensus was trying to develop a troika. You have continuity to Azerbaijan in COP29 and Brazil in COP30 to unlock this capital. This is one of the key pillars of COP28, but these instruments or structures are not there yet. So are we not being realistic of what the World Bank should be doing, the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and the others, the Islamic Development Bank, to deploy this capital, to de-risk these investments? JP, I'd love to get your thoughts of when you enter as well for Schneider, how do you deploy capital and whether you get it out again?
Again, if the idea is that you're going to go through the status quo and you're just going to keep saying here's the need and here's the interest, then you're not being realistic. But if you think about,
I think that's where we are today.
That's where we are today. You think about Europe, right? Europe is ahead of the curve here because they've provided that shield for policymakers. You can go politically and push some of these policies and interactions to open up these markets. That's a lot harder to do in some of these other countries. And without addressing that issue, in my opinion, then it's not very realistic.
Okay, very good. JP, when you go into a market here that, say, doesn't offer that sort of flexibility, you still feel comfortable with Schneider Electric on return of your capital, but return on capital instead?
Our equation is really different for one reason. Again, for the transition to happen, there is a whole supply, and we have great companies in charge of organizing the transition of the supply. But for the transition to happen, the demand has to transition, right? On that has to happen, and this is where it's complicated at the same time. For everything which is related to generation, distribution, or transformation, we are tributary to large amounts of capital and financing. Now, 90% of what we do is on the demand side, which is super fragmented. Buildings with multiple owners, manufacturing with a lot of SMEs who are the heart and core of any industrial fabric. And what we are seeing here is a double transition of digitization and energy transition going together. The capital is not so much of a problem here because the return on investment is really short. Most of the energy efficiency investment would have a return in less than 5 years, on most of them less than 3 years. Now, are people aware of what can be done? Are they aware of that technology transition that allows to do that at the right speed? Not at all. So there is training partners who can be the partners of those customers to integrate. I'll make an example. Kingdom, we have been here for 45 years. Last year, we trained or started up 50 new partners, and we have today 300. So priority is to cover the multitude of customers who want to do that. So there is helping people to start their company, transferring technology, education at every step. Most of the architects are really good at building a building. They are experts in materials. Are they experts at smart building? Almost none. While this is absolutely core and central to energy efficiency. So when we enter in a country, we check that there is a right supply to accompany the transition of the demand. But our job is to work with hundreds and thousands of customers on the transition of the demand, electrical charger for the cars, heat pumps when needed, on digital everywhere. Smart grid, take the example of our biggest deployment of smart grid today in the world is in Egypt. And one would say maybe not in Egypt for the first time, but Egypt is such a large country that it needs that optimization of electrical consumption, and only the grid as an orchestrator can satisfy this need.
It's often overlooked, the grid. I was just going to bring the minister from Indonesia in, but finish your thought.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that you have to put everything at the same time, but Schneider is a company of the 1,000 partners on bringing the necessary technology for those partners to develop their business and improve their factories, their buildings, their cities, and so on.
Okay, very good. I'm curious to know about that smart grid in Egypt, but we'll see if we have time to come back to it, because I was going to ask you, Minister, is your grid, or in the case of Indonesia and Tanzania, is your grid fit for a purpose to handle the different sources of energy?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not
Go
yet.
ahead. Tell me why.
We have to do a lot. Yeah. Besides the modernization of the grid, yeah, we have to have a sufficient interconnection among the island. Yeah, we are now having the long-term plan, yeah, to interconnect four main island, yeah, in order to allow the renewable source, which is located on those locations, into the whole system. And besides that, we have to make sure that the reliability of the system will work well. So we need a smart technology in order to do that. But one more important thing, that this is big scale of usage. We need the backup of industrial manufacturer to back up all the things. Should be available. So besides the finance, we also need the backup of the industrial manufacturer. It means the technology to be suitable and can be cooperate with all the developing countries, all the demand, yeah, to support the transition of energy.
Okay, very good. I wanted to find out from Mr. Nasser, what is the role of oil and gas today to synchronize the energy transition? You said something quite profound in Sarah Week, saying that the transition as we see it today has failed. So how do we move from failure? And a lot of talk, as Jose was talking about here, is like we keep on talking about the fact deployment of capital is not working. How do you get the oil and gas industry aligned with the renewable sector and this tripling of nuclear energy by 22 countries and that commitment by 2050 to map much better in coordination with each other, do you think?
What you need first is a clarity in policy. What you are getting is the industry is getting a mixed signal. On one hand, they were asked not to invest in conventional energy sources. And on the other hand, if the prices goes up, the industry will be blamed by not ensuring there is reliability and security of supply. So this mixed signal makes it difficult for them to put investment. However, the industry is focusing, as I said earlier, in building capacity and at the same time reducing emission. Because we strongly believe that by focusing on emission, we can achieve our goal by 2050 by building renewable solar, wind, hydrogen. But you need to wait for it. You need to give it a realistic time, because today we talk about the grid for renewable. And everybody talks about the cost of generation in solar and wind. That's a cost of generation. The minute you hook it to the grid, connectivity, you add storage facility to it, the cost will go up. That we need time until all of this cost structure goes down. Similarly, hydrogen. You need hydrogen. Without hydrogen, because you are not going to solve, we're talking about power generation today for electric cars and for homes, but we need to think about energy requirement for trucks, for ships, for airplanes, for the hard-to-abate sectors, aluminum, steel. 20% of the emission come from the hard-to-abate sector, aluminum, steel, and cement. We need to take that into consideration. If we don't, and we continue only to focus on one part, we are not going to solve the problem. So the industry as a whole is focusing on reducing emission while building the new. So we are, if you look at Aramco, we are in hydrogen, solar, wind, geothermal, e-fuel, carbon capture and storage, all of the above. Also investing big time on efficiency improvement, but focusing on emission reducing to achieve our net zero by 2050, you need to invest in all of that. Similarly, the industry is doing the same, focusing on emission reduction over time while building the new. But what we need is, as I said, a realistic time frame. We need a policy maker that, while giving a lot of incentives for renewable and new sources of energy, there needs to be also support for carbon capture and storage. You are not going to achieve your net zero by 2050, by the way, without carbon
That's a
capture
good
and storage.
question, because hydrogen, would it follow the similar pathway as solar and wind, where it needed the incentives for the money to go in? Are you getting the incentives for hydrogen, which is just way too expensive, or even carbon capture? They're not part of the mix today to prompt investment?
Today, everybody talks about hydrogen. The only incentive that is available today for green hydrogen at a big scale is the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act in the US. But you don't see a lot of big projects coming on stream, because at the end of the day, if you produce it, it's going to cost you in the range of about $400 per barrel. You need to turn it to ammonia. You need to transport it. You need to backtrack it. You need to have an infrastructure, unless you are putting it in a power plant. So at the end of the day, you need the demand to develop. We are the lowest cost producer, for example, in blue hydrogen. It's around $200 per barrel, oil equivalent. But at the end of the day, you need the demand to develop, and you need the offtake for 15 years. You're not talking about somebody coming and saying, I'm going to sign a 5-year offtake agreement. No, it's not going to work. You need a long-term offtake agreement for it to materialize. So the industry is ready to accelerate the transition. However, you need, at the same time, the demand side. We are willing to, actually we have been waiting for a long time to start our hydrogen projects, but we are waiting for the incentives to come through from the customers that we are dealing with. They're waiting for their governments to give them all of these incentives for it to accelerate. But at the end of the day, it's an affordability issue, even for the West. It's not an affordability issue for the global South only. Even you need solutions that is, at the end of the day, efficient, affordable. Otherwise, you are going to introduce more coal. And when you introduce more coal, you are going to introduce more emission. You see, when we transitioned from coal to gas slowly, coal was going down, gas was ramping up, gas was cheaper. By million BTU, if you added per barrel of oil equivalent, gas was cheaper. So it was something going to happen either way, because you are providing gas at a lower cost.
Good.
Now, when LNG start getting more expensive, coal start picking up. So if we are not careful, when we put our plan for energy transition, taking into consideration all of these elements, you will end up with more emissions, because at the end of the day, priority in different countries, their first priority is putting food on the table.
And I'll just kind of double down on that comment, because it goes back to why you're seeing capital deployed in the global north versus the south, where I think cost has been a barrier to entry without subsidies coming in. However, what you're seeing a lot now is, we saw the cost of producing solar go down by almost 98%. Some people will predict it'll go down another 90%. So you go to certain pockets of the world, you could deploy solar and it's more cost efficient than coal, for example. Again, it's not a big part of the region, but that's where you're seeing capital flow today. But when you come into the other side of that equation, this is where and I see this a lot in my home country in the US, there's this either or. There is no way. I mean, it's the transition, and in order to do this, is going to come from the fossil fuel producing people around the world. Without that, there is no way to go through this transition, because today, this whole thing, are we kidding ourselves? It's in pockets. I can go to Germany today and invest in a $4 billion wind project that is completely offsetting decommissioned, nukes that are coming out, that the grid's in place and all that. And I will tell you, the economics work terrific. Those are pockets in time, and it's not really, we talk about these things, but it's not solving the broader issue, where today you need operators, you need governments, you need capital, all to come together and say, what do you want to do about accelerating this J-curve? Otherwise, it'll just happen the way this has always happened with everything else over time. It'll happen slowly as technology comes in and capital markets open up.
Okay, final question to Minister Kijali. What is your energy access in electricity in Tanzania? How many people have access in percentage-wise, of the better than 60 million people in your country? What's the percentage of access, would you say?
Currently, because we have this rural electrification project, we just pushed the number, and it's almost now 75% of Tanzanians have electricity.
That's excellent.
Yes, and you asked the Honorable Minister there about the national grid in Tanzania. Last 5 years, we started working with our national grid to support this energy mix within. So we are in a good position of having that. What really we are looking at is now the infrastructure from various sources of the energy coming to the national grid. So we are almost done with the national grid supporting the energy mix in Tanzania.
Good. Where'd you find the capital for that, by the way? Was it difficult to raise money for it?
Oh, that was from within the country.
Great.
Yes.
It's much
as
more
we
impressive
said-
than I thought you'd have in terms of electric access to energy. 75%.
75% of Tanzanians, yes.
Great. We have 5 minutes left exactly. I wanted to see if anybody wanted to take questions from the floor. Do we have the microphones available? Here, perfect. Any questions here? Please. If you can, I think it would be good if you just identify yourself, and if you can direct it to one person on the panel, it would be great. And feel free to answer. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So my name is Kirsty Gogan. I'm co-founder and CEO of TerraPraxis, and we're developing a strategy to repurpose existing coal plants with advanced nuclear to co-locate advanced manufactured reactors with existing coal facilities to enable clean steam to be used in the existing power island to continue operation without emissions. And that means matching the site footprint and enabling continued supply of energy, but without emissions. I'd love to hear the panel's views on that, and we're partnered with Schneider Electric also.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chazreef, thanks for the question. Before we have you answer, any other questions? We can get a microphone to you. There's one here. Great. Go ahead, Minister. Thanks.
Thanks. Regarding the confession, transition from the coal to steam, we have individual coal power plant which support the smelting industries for our mineral processing. It's about 20 gigawatt, which currently they are asking us for the changing of the primary energy from coal right now to the gas. And then we also look forward for other possible energy to replace the coal.
Interesting. We have an answer there, I think.
So
It's a clever idea, though, right? To use that base to transfer it from whether you said natural gas or to nuclear. But you're open to the idea, is what you're suggesting, sir?
the idea,
Are you're open to the idea?
well, in case the company or investor would like to come, and we are willing to communicate between the both parties, yeah, because I think they also realize on how important to reduce their emission from their industries.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. Question here, please. Thanks.
Hello. Yes. Hi, my name is Jitsai Santaputra from Thailand. I'm part of the Global Shapers youth community here. My question is to the minister from Indonesia and from Tanzania. It's about cross-border power trade and the future of that. What is the business case for that? And do you find that your countries are supportive? And what does that look like in the future?
Great question. Minister Kajali, you said there's a market of 500 million in East Africa. Are you getting to the cross-border? Are you getting to that level where it's an option?
Yes, we are getting to that because we have also within the East African countries, we have projects that connects us. That's Rwanda to Tanzania, Uganda to Tanzania. So the projects are there, and it's a good business case, and we are moving towards finalizing that.
Great. JP, are you getting involved with this? Because it's the flavor of the day in Africa, and I know ASEAN's trying to do this to support cross-border trade with the technologies. Have you undertaken those projects?
Yes. Again, I'm going to be always singing the same song, but it's all digitized, right? You need to have the data. I mean, we're saying before something very true. In energy, there is too much ideology. At the end of the day, it's about figures. So the first thing should be that we measure our carbon, we measure the cost of energy, we can trade energy on exchange energy. And the first thing is measuring your carbon, getting everything digitized. And then from that, you can strategize, implement. And when you have solid data, my experience is that you can attract solid capital.
I was going to say, are you interested in investing as a group into the grid systems? You find that the return is attractive enough for institutional investors?
You know, typically the grid system is a terrific investment opportunity for us, and we've invested across the U.S. because largely, again, what happens with a grid system, that is, again, it's hard to get private equity capital, hedge funds. That you're talking 20, 25-year structures, and most of the places where we invest in a grid system approach, they're regulated. So you've got a regulator telling us, the investor day one, I am going to allow you to earn 8 or 9 or 7%. So it's a very controllable environment. Obviously, it's different in different regions, but that's how we look at that. And then the flip side that you're hearing around this is, which is also becoming a really interesting narrative, is around digital infrastructure, tech infrastructure, because as investors, we're all looking at demand, supply, imbalances. So of course, to catch up to this curve, where's the other area that starts needing capital? It's the technology side. So I can tell the investor community, you're seeing a lot of funds pop up now that are specifically focused, not on just holding that hard asset. They're specifically focused around companies who are bringing in the technology to improve that cost curve.
Okay, very good. I was going to ask you, Mr. Nasser, a question I never posed before. Would Aramco take its expertise, because it's known for its engineering prowess and major projects, and how do you support an Indonesia or a Tanzania or the global south where the demand is? Do you see a future where Aramco's operating internationally? Is that in the scope?
We are operating internationally, actually. We are in the downstream in different countries currently. We are in Malaysia and China and Japan and Korea and different parts of the world.
And in the refining space, right?
Yeah, but and the liquid to chemical and chemical space. However, we have created a business in new energies, so we are looking at investment right now in new energies outside Saudi Arabia, and they are currently in discussion with a lot of partners around the globe in terms of investment in different parts of the world. So it is an area of interest for us.
Yeah, because I think that the quick deployment of energy is of utmost priority for you, correct? And for the solutions. I've seen the projects you've doing in terms of scale and downstream, and the petrochemicals with SABIC, which you have a major investment in, has made a huge difference. What a terrific panel. I think we could have gone for another hour. We could only scratch the surface here. But I'm delighted that the team from Energy and Materials pulled together such a diverse panel. Investors, technology, 2 emerging markets, and a major player in the production of oil and gas. And as you said, other streams of energy. Instead of formally re-announcing, I just wanted to say thank you. We have the hashtag special meeting 24. If you like what you had to see, this session will be online, and you can share it, or just share your thoughts on the business case for the transition. We're all ears on solutions, correct? Yeah. Thanks. Can we give a nice round of applause to our panel? Thank you very much. Nicely done.
Looking forward to this.